We are now ready to hand sew. I'm taking brightly colored thread so you can hopefully see this. You'll probably choose white. If you sew with white, you won't see your thread. You're going to take about an arm's length of thread. You're going to cut that end. And here comes the tricky part. We need to thread a needle. When I choose a needle, I do not want to choose a needle that's enormous with a giant eye because it's going to come undone as I'm sewing. I want a small needle. I'm going to push the end of the thread through the eye of the needle. Now I have this is called my tag end. And this here, my hand, right here as I squeeze is my tension. So if I'm squeezing with my hand and I'm pulling on this thread, it's not coming out undone because this is holding it down. Now I'm coming down to the end. And this is another challenge here. I'm actually going to put a knot on the end of this. So I actually get my fingertip wet. I put the very end of this thread on my finger. I pinch it with my thumb and I roll it over. So you can see that that tag end is right on the top of my finger. Now I can spin it off my finger and it goes around and around. Then I can pull down inside of there. And I have this messy little knot. I don't mind that it's messy because it's big, so that when I go to put it in to the edge of that sewing line, it's going to get trapped in there. Okay, I'm not pulling really hard, just nice and loose so it doesn't come out. I have to stay stitch, just like I was stay stitching or back stitching on my sewing machine. I do the same with hand sewing. So I sew one time, and I can pull a little more tightly. I sew 2 times. Exactly in the same spot. Now I can pull tight and it's locked. It's time to travel. So I go in where my thread has come out and I put my needle on an angle in the direction that I'm sewing. I pick up some of the body and I come out on the other side a little ways along. I pull tight. I go straight across from where my threads come out. I go into the body and I come out a little bit farther along. All the ways across. When I get up to the needle, or the pin, sorry, I can take that pin out. But when I take the pin out, I need to put it in my pin cushion. And I pick up more of that. You'll see sometimes this starts to run, and that's fine. I just make sure that I picked up maybe a bit on either side of that. Okay, and then when it all stitches in, it'll close together and it'll be fine. There it goes, right to the other side. So if you had used white thread instead of this gold, you probably wouldn't even see these little seams. Now I'm at the end. I'm going to sew right across from where that thread is and pull tight, and then I'm going to do that again, going straight across. But before I pull tight this last time, I have a little loop. Into that loop, I'm going to put my needle one time, pull it tight, up and over, it's going in there again, and now I have made a knot. See, it looks just like that little loop that I had made around my finger in the beginning. I can pull it tight, I do one more little stitch to tuck that knot down, and I can trim my seams. Okay, so I'm ready to attach an arm. When I lay out for the arm, I want to make sure that I've placed my mouth roughly where I want it, because if I set my arm up here but then place my mouth, my monkey might look a little weird. So I'm going to make sure that I know where my mouth is going to be. And remember, I will be tucking those in. And then I need to figure out where is that seam from when I made the arm in the first place, because I like that seam to be on the bottom. It just looks nicer. So I can place my arm where I want it, and then I have to pin it. So I take my pin, and I don't go straight in and just stab it, because it's just going to fall right out again. What I need to do is I need to fold that in, place the arm, put my pin on an angle, pick up a bit of the arm into the body, and then I'm twisting back and I'm pushing it up in through the arm again. So there's the point of my pin popping back out. And one pin should probably do it. Now I've got my needle and thread, and I'm going to move that tag end a bit longer because I've already been sewing with this thread, but I feel like I have enough thread to go around the arm. I'm going to make the knot on the end of that. Some of us might find this is a tricky way to make a knot, but I don't know. You will have to find the way that works best for you. It's not an easy task, so don't get discouraged. Okay, now I can put my arm straight up and down. I get my mouth out of the way, and I can pick up a little bit of the body and a little bit of the arm. Just like when I sealed up the body, I don't want to push or pull too hard when I first put the thread in because it's just going to pull out again. This is such a loose knit that these little tiny little knots don't like to secure that easily. So I'm sewing exactly the same spot where my needle first went in and where it first came out. And I'm going to pull a little bit more tightly, and then I can do that one more time. That's your stay stitch. So unlike at the machine where you back stitch, here you can stay stitch. You can stay stitch on a sewing machine too, but that's just not what we're doing. So we're picking up a bit of the body and we're coming up the arm. You're going to do that all the ways around the circle. You can stop it there. Ready to attach an ear. I still have to seal that edge that I had tucked in before, so I'm actually going to start up there. So let's start by, I've threaded my needle. Now I'm going to put a knot in the end. Keep showing you this each time because it's a real challenge. Okay, we go into that gap with the needle, and I pull tight, but not too tight, and see if I start in there, I can even tuck that messy little knot in so it's hidden. Now I'm going to go straight across, and remember this is my lock stitch. I don't pull too tight this time. The second time I can really pull tight. Now I'm locked, I can start to travel. So I go straight across from where I started and I travel when I'm inside. That way my stitches are tiny and hidden. So I go straight across from where that thread's popping out, over here, I pull tight and my stitches are small. Once I get to the end, I can attach, I've still got my thread, and now my thread is right at the end of the ear where I want to start attaching it to the face. So, now I'm in here, I can line up my ear, I can lay it down sideways, and I can pick up a piece of the body and a piece of the ear, just like you did the arm, and just like you'll do the tail and the mouth. It's all the same. The only difference is once I come up this one side of the ear and I get to the top, I actually like to flip it over and sew down the other side. That way my ear sticks out. If I just do this one side, it might just lay like this and then not. If I want it to really be strong and to stick out, I go over to the other side and I run it all the ways back down to where I started attaching it to the body. So just a little bit of the body, a little bit of the ear. You can see I keep my needle really close to where they're attached. That keeps my stitches small and invisible. If you start your needle back here and you come out over here, you're going to have a giant stitch. So I go as close to that seam as I can, and I come out as close to that seam as I can. And I go right to the end. Now I can lock it. So I'm picking up in the spot where I finished. So my thread tag's coming out there. I'm going in right where my thread has come out, and I pull tight. I'm going to lengthen this little tag here by pulling a bit because I don't want it to get caught in here as I do my knot. I'm going one more time, but I'm not pulling tight. I'm making that little loop. I can go through my loop one time and then through my loop 2 times. Now I can pull tight. I always like to sew it one more time in there to lock it under. It just tucks it underneath, and now you have an ear. We're We're attaching the mouth. We've tucked this all under and we've put pins in there to hold it down. It's bunchy here because I'm going to start sewing on this side, go up and over, around to this side, and I'm going to leave a little hole here. I'm going to put a bunch of stuffing in there. By then all of these pins will be out, and then I'm going to finish sealing it shut. I'm using all the same techniques that I had used to attach my arm and my ear. So I'm simply grabbing some of the body and some of the mouth, and I'm lock stitching. One time, one more time, just to be sure. And then I travel. And I go all the ways around that mouth. But just like you did for the ear, you're leaving just a little space before you seal it off. And with that space, I'll take a little bit more batting, and I'm going to end up shoving it in here. By then, all the pins will be gone because I'll have sewn up to them. You're getting ready to put some buttons on for eyes. This time, rather than have one tag longer than the other for single thread sewing, we're actually going to line up the thread tags so that we are going to sew an embroidered mouth across the front of the mouthpiece. So I just want to show the difference. We're going to grab a needle that has a much larger eye than the needle that you've been hand sewing with, because you're going to use embroidery floss that's a much larger diameter. So I'm going to take a piece of the embroidery floss and cut that edge, thread the needle, and see it all wants to come apart. I like to get it wet just to help squish it all down. And I also like to get my thumb and finger as close to that edge as possible. You can see this is no easy undertaking. Now we're putting a knot in the end, and I will trim that little thread tag. I'm going to go in from underneath here on the side of the mouth, and I pop up, and what happens is that little knot that I made, if I keep pulling, it'll just hide underneath. Now instead of moving forward, I actually go backwards. So I sort of do an underwater leapfrog. So I go back and then beyond, and what happens is I back stitch so that I can go back again to where that stitch ended and pop out a little bit further along. And what happens is all my stitches create one solid line. So I can go back and pop out a little bit further along. If I want a smile, I would run this in a U shape. If I want a shocked expression, I might run this in a circle shape, but I sort of like them going straight across. He's just, well, maybe he's bored, maybe he's feeling a little uninspired. I think he just looks like a traditional sock monkey when he's like this. So I think, and it's easy. It's a nice straight line. So there you go. I've made the mouth and I'm at my last stitch. Rather than going back and then beyond, I'm going to go back and then end right where that stitch is. That way I can make my little lock stitch by picking up just a little piece out of the way of that button. Make my little loop, and I can go through my loop one time, two times. I'm going to pull tight. And this is where it really does pay to give one last stitch to tack down the tag end of the knot. It's just going to pull it underneath. There you go.